Hey guys, and welcome to Graphic Designer Pro. In our last video, which I'll link up here somewhere, Emily showed us how to create an amazing glitch effect animation in Adobe After Effects. And it got me thinking, how do we do the same thing but for a static vector design? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create two different types of glitch effect in Adobe Illustrator 2021. You can also download a free template file from the description below that you can use to follow along with this tutorial. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a like and subscribe for more weekly content. Okay, let's head on to Illustrator now and get started. Okay, so here we are in Adobe Illustrator and we have our template file open. Like I say, you can download this from the description below if you want to follow along exactly with what we're doing. So starting with the artboard over on the left-hand side, we are going to create our first glitch effect with this outlined text here. Now, if you're interested, the font we're using here is called Rift Bold, and it's actually an Adobe font, so anyone who has an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription can activate this for free. But regardless, this is outlined and we can apply both of these effects we're going to look at really to any kind of vector design that you're working with. So it doesn't just have to be text, it can really be anything, and we can get some quite interesting results. So the first thing we're going to do is grab the rectangle tool over on the left hand side. The keyboard shortcut for that is M, and what we want to do first is create segments that we are going to offset this text with. So simply clicking and dragging on this, I'm going to create some small cuts through this text. What I'm also going to do is flip this from a white fill to a white stroke. So the keyboard shortcut for that is Shift X. Or we can use this little double-ended arrow down here, and I'll show you the reason for that afterwards. Now I'm going to continue creating a few more. We'll create some slightly smaller cuts here. It's good to have a variety of sizes, I think, for a slightly more authentic look. Go with a slightly bigger one here, for example. Let's do another smaller one down here, and we'll finish off with one at the bottom. Okay, so that will do. From here, I'm going to grab my selection tool and just click and drag over all of these boxes and the text, and we're going to go to our Pathfinder options. Now I have my properties panel set up here. You can equally go to Window and then down to Pathfinder to open the Pathfinder panel, which I also have set up on the right hand side. And the option we want to use is Divide. So that's the icon in the bottom left. If I click that, nothing is seemingly going to change in terms of the appearance, but what this has essentially done is create shapes from every section that overlaps with one another. So if I click off this, this is all going to be grouped by default now, so I need to click on it, right click, and then select ungroup, and you'll see each of these segments is now its own shape. Press undo a few times, and now what we want to do is get rid of all of these excess areas. So an easy way of doing that is to grab the magic wand tool, which sits over on the left hand side. The keyboard shortcut for that is Y. So I'll click that, then simply click on one of these rectangles that sits outside of the text, and it's going to automatically select all of the other areas that match these parameters. So I can simply hit delete now, and we're just left with our text. So what I want to do now is offset sections of this text. So what I'm going to actually do first is click and drag over all of it, press Shift X again, and that's going to flip it back to a stroke instead of a fill, and this is just slightly easier to see what sections we're dealing with. What I'm going to do from here is just click and drag across to select each row of objects that we have here, and I'm just going to group these together. So we're wanting to create rows here instead of columns, so just clicking and dragging across to select the next one, and I'll just continue doing this all the way down so that each row of shapes that's been created is grouped. Okay, so I now have all of my groups. You can see if I just click down here, these are all grouped together. So what we're going to do from here is offset these. So I'm just going to use my left and right arrow keys. If I just tap once, it's barely going to move. So if I hold Shift, that's actually going to move at greater distances at a time. So that's a slightly easier way of doing it. And I just really want to offset these a bit to create this glitch effect. It doesn't have to be crazy. We still want the text to be legible. So I'm just being careful about how much I'm moving them. Even this will do in this example. I think this is good enough. So what I'll do is click and drag over all of it and press Shift X again to flip that back to a fill, and you can get a better idea of how this is looking. So what I can do from here is click and drag over all of it, and I'm just going to use my Unite Pathfinder option now. So that's the first one in our options. If I click that, it's just going to unite all of these individual shapes back into single shapes for each character. What I'm going to do from here, just to make it a little bit more interesting, is just add a few more rectangles around it, just to add some more glitching elements, and I think this really helps add to the effect overall. This can really be quite random. I'm not doing this in any particular way. It's just to give this a little bit more interest. We can even do these in between the text here. And what I also like to do is kind of join them up as well, making sure they are snapping to one another at the top and bottom. I think this works quite well in this case. So I'll just add a few more roundabout here. And I think that will do for this example. What I'm going to do now is click and drag over all of this. I'm just going to use the Unite option one more time just to merge any of these rectangles that are up against one another, make sure they're all merged correctly. Now, another thing I like to do in something like this is to slightly round off the corners. Sometimes I think having perfectly sharp corners and edges can look a little bit too perfect for something like a glitch effect. So an easy way of doing this is to add a stroke to this. With everything selected, I'm just going to go and add a white stroke, so it's the same color. If I go into my stroke options, I'm going to select rounded corners. So that's just going to slightly round off the corners, especially if I up the stroke weight, which I'm going to do. I'll maybe go as high as 4 point here, and obviously this is going to make the text slightly heavier, but in this case, I don't think that's a problem. This is just going to help it look a little bit less perfect and sharp, which I think personally gives for a nicer effect. What I need to do now is expand that stroke. So with it all selected again, let's go up to Object, Expand, make sure Fill and Stroke are checked, and then click OK. And one more time, I'm just going to use the Unite Pathfinder option. So that's just going to make sure all of this is merged together nicely. Now, before I actually create the offsets for this, what I need to do is convert this to a compound path. So what that means is that when we have lots of different objects here, even if they're grouped, they're still being treated as separate objects. However, if we convert it to a compound path, that's basically telling Illustrator to treat all of these individual objects as a single object. So you'll see what I mean in just a moment. We need to go up to Object, Compound Path, and then Make. As you can see though, the keyboard shortcut for this is Command 8 or Control 8 on a PC. So I'll click that, and nothing is going to change visually, but this is now going to be treated as a single shape, which is going to be necessary for the next step. So what we're going to do first is drop the opacity down to about 50%. And this is just so we can see what we're doing with these offsets. So what I need to now do is create a duplicate of this. Now I could just press Command C and Command F, but what I'm going to do instead, which is much easier, is just hold Option, or that'll be Alt on a PC. And if I just click and drag off to one side, holding Shift, that's going to lock it onto the same horizon. And we're just going to offset this slightly. And these are going to create the basis of our glitch effect. You can move this to your liking. It depends how much of a glitch you want to create. I think this kind of thing is fine for this example, and what we're going to do now is actually apply some color to this. So with the option on the right selected, I'm now going to press I on my keyboard, and that's going to enable the eyedropper tool. Now you'll notice we have some colored squares up here, and this is just for sampling color from. So I'm going to click on the pink tile, and that's going to color our duplicated object pink. You can see it's all being applied. And now I'm going to go back to my selection tool. We'll select the original object. Again, pressing I on the keyboard, I'm now going to click on the blue tile. So we have our two offset colors. This is the basis of this glitch effect. I'm going to select both of them now, and I want to press Command C, and this will be copied. What we're now going to do is use our Pathfinder options as well to knock out all the areas that aren't overlapping. So we essentially have two objects here, a pink object and a blue object. And what we're going to do is go back to our Pathfinder options, and we have this option here that says intersect. So if I click that, it's essentially only leaving the areas of those two objects that overlapped. Now what I'm going to do from here is grab my eyedropper tool again, so I on the keyboard, and we're going to make this section white. From here, I can paste my original two objects back in place. So to do that, it's just Command F or Control F on a PC. Now this is pasted in front, but all I need to do is send these two objects to the back to reveal that white object that we just created. So to do that, I just need to right click, go down to arrange, and then send to back. And now all of a sudden we have a pretty solid glitch effect. So this was relatively easy to do. We still have a few more techniques just to make this look even better, and we're going to run through them now. So I'm now going to click and drag over all of these, and I'm just going to group them all together. So Command G or Control G on a PC, and I'm going to slightly italicize this, give it a little bit more emphasis. So an easy way of doing that is to right click, we'll go down to transform and then shear. So we actually have a shear tool as well, and this is just an easy way to slightly angle our designs and give them a little bit more emphasis. Make sure you are on the horizontal axis, and I'm using a shear angle of 8 degrees here. Now I could equally choose vertical and we could create something this way as well. It really depends on what you're going for. This can also create something quite interesting, but in this case let's just stick with horizontal 8 degrees, and I'm just going to click OK. The final thing I like to do is to mimic some of these scan lines that we've used in the background of this template. This just gives it a little bit more of a glitchy digital look. So to do that, I'm going to press Command C to copy our selection here, and then again Command F, or that's Control C and Control F if you're on a PC. So we essentially have a duplicate of what we've just created, and what I'm going to do is go back to my Pathfinder, click the Unite option again. This is just going to create a single set of objects from our full selection, so this is just all white again, and I'm just going to use a default Illustrator pattern for this. So I already have this set up within my swatches here, but you can easily access these by going to the menu in the top right of your swatches panel, down to Open Swatch Library, then down to Patterns, Basic Graphics, and then Basic Graphics Lines. So you'll see all these options here. You can really experiment with any of these depending on the thickness of the lines you want. We already have these set up in our document though. So I'm just going to go back up to my swatches, and we already have this set up here. If I click it, you can see it's just going to apply some black lines across this selection. So even this actually creates quite an interesting look, but in this case I'm just going to drop the opacity of this right down to 10%. Let's hit enter, and that's just going to give it that subtle scanline look that you would see on something like an old television. This just rounds it off and makes it look slightly more authentic, but that's it for our first glitch effect. Let's move on to the artboard on the right hand side. We already have some italicized text here, so this one's a little bit more simple to create. We are going to use the envelope distort option for this. So with our outlined text selected, so all we need to do is go up to Object, down to Envelope Distort, and then we are going to choose Make with Mesh. So what this does is it's going to create this mesh over our selection, and what we can do with this is warp and distort it depending on the points that we have plotted here. Now you'll notice this pop up where we can actually adjust how many rows and columns we have. So we can make this very simple. We could only go 3 rows, for example, or we could bump this up. Same with the columns. We could actually go down to just have a single column, which is all we used in the example that you saw at the start. But in this case, I'm actually going to bump this up to 3, and we'll do something a little bit different. So let's go ahead and click OK. And now all I need to do is, with my direct selection tool, so A on the keyboard, is I can select any one of these intersecting points, or I can select multiple at a time. And if I click and drag on any of these, you can see it's going to warp and distort our selection. So in this case, I'm going to click and drag across a whole row of points, so similar to what we were doing in the last example, and I'm just going to slightly offset these. So I'm not going to do anything major on this first example. I'm just going to select the second from the top and the second from the bottom, and I'm just going to push them in opposite directions while holding shift. So for our first one, that's all I'm going to do. This is our base text, if that makes sense. And now we are going to duplicate this to apply the offset areas. So I'm going to press Command C and Command F to make a duplicate. So we have the exact same text duplicated here. I'm actually going to double click on this so that we have it isolated. We're not going to accidentally edit the original text. And up in my control panel, we have this icon here to edit the envelope. If you don't have the control panel set up, you can always go up to Object, down to Envelope Distort, and then Edit Envelope, and that's going to do the same thing. And I'm just basically going to exaggerate how much this is being warped. So selecting the same row of anchor points, so second from the top, I'm going to push this out even more. What I'm also going to do is just drag this top right anchor point up a bit. I might even do the same over this side, just so it looks a little bit more crazy. And I'll also grab these bottom anchor points as well and push them out one. So what I can do from here is grab my regular selection tool. If I double click on this now, we can change the color. So again, pressing I on the keyboard, I'm just going to eyedrop that pink color. Let's double click anywhere outside of our selection, and that's just going to take us back out into the normal view. And I'm going to right click on this, go to arrange, and then send to back. So that's going to sit behind our original text, and you can see already this is creating quite an interesting looking glitch effect. Let's select our original text again. We'll make another copy. So Command C, Command F. Let's double click into it so it's isolated, and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to click on the edit envelope icon. We get our mesh appearing again. Press A on the keyboard to get my direct selection tool. And now I'm going to do the opposite. So let's grab the second from bottom row of anchor points. And we'll push these out as well, push these out quite a lot. And again, we're just going to make this look a little bit more interesting to create a glitchy looking effect. So we'll go with something like that. Again, going back to my normal selection tool, I'll double click on this, press I on the keyboard to get my eyedropper tool, and click the blue tile up at the top. And let's just go back to our selection tool, double click out of here, and we'll do the same thing, just right click, arrange, and then send to back. So this is the kind of effect we're creating. I think this is quite an interesting one and fairly easy to create. We can add a little bit more detail to this, so let's click and drag over everything, and I'm going to expand this effect. So at the moment you can still see the original type outlines, so this isn't actually properly expanded, but to do that all I need to do is go up to Object, Envelope Distort, and then Expand. So now the actual paths are following the manipulations that we made. So from here, I quite like adding a little bit of roughness to this. And before I do, I'm actually going to go over to my Pathfinder options again. So we've used them quite a lot, and this is where the Pathfinder is still very useful over things like the Shape Builder tool. So I'm going to use our divide option again. So that's the bottom left icon. I'll click this, and that's going to create individual shapes from every overlapping path in our selection. From here, I want to apply a little bit of roughness to these just to make it look a little bit less perfect again. So I mentioned that in the last example, and I think it helps with an effect like this. So to do that, I'm going to go up to Effect, down to Distort and Transform, and then Roughen. Now this is going to look crazy to begin with, it always does by default. I'm going to check the smooth option to start, and I also prefer using the absolute option as we can actually dial in a precise pixel value. So I'm going to take this right down. We want this to be quite subtle really. Let's go with 2 pixels for now, and I'm actually going to add way more detail, maybe 30, and this is just to make it a little less perfect. Let's click OK, and what this is doing is because we created individual shapes, we're getting these small areas in between the letters getting created, and I actually quite like this. I think this actually looks a little bit more glitchy and imperfect, so that's why I choose to do it this way. Of course, you could just not use the divide option and you would avoid this, but I personally quite like this. So this is the kind of effect we're getting. I'm going to click and drag over these, and again we want to make sure this is expanded, so I need to go up to Object and then Expand Appearance, and our path is actually going to follow this new effect that we've applied. Last but not least, I'm going to do the same thing by applying the scan lines to it. So I'm going to make sure this is all grouped for a start. So Command G is the shortcut, Control G on a PC. Let's copy this, so Command C and then Command F. So we now have a duplicate. Let's use our Unite Pathfinder option, so that's all going to get merged together, so it's all looking black. And now this time I'm actually going to use white lines instead because we have black text, so it's going to show up more. I already have this set up in my swatches, but it's the exact same principle as before. So if I select that, you can see we've got this white line pattern. This again kind of looks quite interesting as is, but the same thing here. We're going to knock down the opacity, this time to about 40%. So this one's a little bit more obvious, but I think this really helps in giving it a more natural look. But that's it for our 2 glitch effects in Adobe Illustrator 2021. Hope you enjoyed this content. Remember, if you did, hit the like button and subscribe for more weekly content. If you want to learn more about graphic design, we've put together a free 1-hour training where you'll discover the top 5 secrets of successful designers, which saves you the hassle of trying to figure it all out for yourself. We'll be showing you how to immerse yourself in the sector you're designing for, creative thinking and how to spark creativity, what good composition is and how you can achieve it in your designs, how to pick the right colours for your designs, and how to pick the right typefaces for your project. So if you're serious about leveling up as a graphic designer, then make sure to sign up for the next free webinar. Space is limited and these events always fill up fast because they're significantly better than the information others charge you for, and ours is free. The link's in the description, you're not going to want to miss it. I'll see you there.